I love that groove. You're listening to America's Voice now. And if you're just joining with us, we're in our second segment this morning. We broke the news that American patriots are putting out a bounty on the IRS. I love it. I love that idea. Talk about hitting them where it hurts, right? There ain't nothing better than that. I can't stand, liars, cutthroats, and traitors. Anybody who would betray their own people for some short-term gain on their personal lifestyle, job, whatever, got no use for them. But I got to tell you something, America. America, you have a chance and an opportunity to set the record straight here. And I can't encourage you strongly enough to participate. There's a post out there on the Blaze about a $1 million bounty that's being offered for smoking gun in the IRS scandal. And I want to take it and expand it beyond that. And I'll try to communicate with Greg Phillips and Ms. Albrecht about doing exactly that. But America, throw $5 at this. $1, for five different funds. Let's raise $100 million. And they're buying treason. Let's buy. I mean, if a guy, or a person who works in an office out there needs money to stand up and do the right thing, okay, guess what? As long as we end up getting the evidence to be able to convict these people and expose the truth of their treason to America, fine. That's how they're getting them. They're bribing them with the job. Speaking of jobs, sometimes I surprise myself with how smooth I segue in from one area to another. Yeah, right. Speaking of jobs, isn't it amazing that 47% of Americans in a brand new poll have completely given up looking for a job? I kid you not, 47% of all the unemployed have completely given up looking for a job. And it was done over 1,500 unemployed adult Americans last month. 47% agree with the following statement: I've completely given up looking for a job. 7% said they agree completely. 7% said they agree a lot. 15% say they agree somewhat. Forget the numbers. It doesn't matter. You get the point. But here's the real problem. We know we've got a massive unemployment problem in this country. Did you know that in the minority population, the black minority population, the unemployment rate is at 20%? I mean, I've heard numbers even higher than that, but let's just, and I've heard 20% more consistently. So let's use that because, all of this is fudge nonsense, statistical gamesmanship anyhow. But for the record, I mean, that's the official number. Now, the official number in the United States is south of 7%. It's like 6.5 or 6.9 or something. So my point is, and we know that unemployment's far higher than that because all these people who stop looking for work, they're not even on the list anymore. That's how they get the number down, by saying, well, these people aren't unemployed. They just don't exist anymore. They're shadows in our society. Really? They're shadows with children to feed, mortgages to pay, cars to pay for, gasoline to buy, food to purchase. Hello? But meanwhile, we've got the Department of Labor. Wait until you hear this one. We've got the Department of Labor, and you know what they say? Now, of course, the Department of Labor has one job, right? They are supposed to represent and support American labor force, right? But the U.S. Secretary, the Deputy Secretary of Labor, a guy by the name of Chris Liu, L-U, which means he's of Asian descent, apparently, he came out the other day and he made an amazing statement showing us that, which frankly, in my opinion, qualifies him for immediate resignation and removal from his job. If he doesn't resign, he should be removed. Because he works for the U.S. Department of Labor, which has a fiduciary responsibility. Now, the word fiduciary means something very, very important in law. A fiduciary responsibility is different than just a responsibility. A fiduciary responsibility has a higher threshold. A fiduciary responsibility is the one that your bank holds when they hold your money. They owe you a higher level of trust because you gave them that money for safekeeping. A fiduciary responsibility is the one that your attorney has to you. He's supposed to allegedly represent you. Now, if he works for the Bar Association, and they all do, 100% of them do, they have actually sworn allegiance to the court, just for the record, in case you didn't know this. They actually don't represent you. They are an officer of the court, officially. Did you know that every attorney is legally an officer of the court? Yeah, that means they don't represent you. But anyway, I digress. My point is simply this. They have, in theory, a fiduciary responsibility to you. A fiduciary responsibility is the one that your attorney has when you give him money to hold into trust. And you say, here, put this in your trust account, and when we close the business deal, that'll be used for the down payment. Now, the fiduciary responsibility he has is to hold that in safekeeping and in trust for you, and not to, take his girlfriend on vacation to the Bahamas. Right? Well, a person who works for a government agency that has been created for the benefit and the improvement of the labor force in the United States has a fiduciary responsibility to represent the U.S. labor force. But Chris Liu came out and said, we need to also fix our broken immigration system to encourage more highly educated foreign-born workers to come to the United States. If we are to compete in a global economy, we must continue to attract and retain the world's brightest minds. Too many foreign students, many from Asian countries, come to the United States to further their education, but must return home when they cannot obtain a green card or an immigrant visa. As part of President Barack Obama's immigration reforms, he has called for stapling green cards to the diplomas of foreign graduate students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, STEM fields, S-T-E-M, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Here's the problem. The department's actual website has a mission statement on it, and here's what it says. To foster, promote, and develop the welfare of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States. Improve working conditions, advance opportunities for profitable employment, and assure work-related benefits and rights. Nowhere in there does it say improve the lot of foreign students who come here to get an education. Nowhere in there does it say support and protect and defend foreign workers over and above your own countrymen. Nowhere in there does it say to foster, promote, and develop the welfare of wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the entire world before we will look after our own here in the United States. It doesn't say that. So, whose side is Mr. Liu working on? You see, when you break your fiduciary responsibility, it's an abuse of trust, and that's a legal term too. Because an abuse of trust is one that has very, very clear criminal implication. Now, an abuse of trust is the one that says your attorney spills the beans on something privately that you and he have discussed and arranged. Right? You have this thing called client-attorney privilege. If your attorney goes out there and talks to the prosecutor and says, my guy admitted to it, but we got to figure it. Oh, right there, abuse of trust. An abuse of trust is an attorney who does, in fact, take your money out of the account that he's holding for you in trust for the coming real estate or business deal, and he takes his girlfriend on vacation with it. That's not his money. An abuse of trust is someone who takes the power of attorney that you've given them, and you've signed power of attorney to, your cousin who you thought you could trust because you've asked him to handle some issue for you. And while he's there, he does something that is not part of that job. You've asked him to go and close a real estate transaction for you. But while he's at it, he goes to the bank and he withdraws $10,000 and he puts it in his own pocket. He didn't have the right to do that. That was a violation of his designated duty as a power of attorney, and someone to act on your behalf. The key operative phrase here is acting on our behalf. But Mr. Liu is not acting on our behalf. In fact, we know he's not, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there's a brand new report out from the Center for Immigration Studies. Now, this is the same group, by the way, that broke the news on the 36,000 illegal immigrants that were released into the community after having committed 88,000 crimes, including murder, kidnapping, child abuse, rape, assault, battery, burglary. The list goes on. The Center for Immigration Studies has, and National Review, a reporter at National Review, have put together a brand new report that incorporates reports from other entities, one of whom is called the Economic Policy Institute, another one called the Rand Corporation. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Rand Corporation is, they're a massive multinational. They are usually involved in some kind of skullduggery and kind of nebulous. My point is that they're generally supporters of big government, not the other way around. The Urban Institute and the National Research Council. All four of these groups have all found the same thing, that there is no evidence that STEM workers are in short supply. In fact, they found exactly the opposite to be true. Not only are they not in short supply, but we can't fill the jobs that we have for the ones that are graduating that are born here. So why would we import others to do the jobs that we can't fill and make it even harder for our young graduates to be able to get the jobs that they've just finished a college degree and paid for? Hello? I mean, how many times have you heard the term, we need common sense reform? What's not common sense about take care of your own first? You wouldn't take food out of your own kid's mouth to give to a total stranger. You wouldn't say, we don't have much, we're just going to make the mortgage this month, and then say, but you know what? There's a poor family down the road who we don't know, and we heard that they didn't pay their mortgage, so we're not going to pay ours, we're going to pay their mortgage for them instead. Not when you're on the balls of your rear end and you can barely afford your own. You have an obligation, a fiduciary obligation to your own self and your family. To make it even worse, PBS, that's the public broadcasting system, which is funded by the federal government and is a vast apologist for this administration, they even published an opinion piece based on the EPI study. That's the Economic Policy Institute study. And here's what they titled it. This is stunning from PBS. Quote, "The bogus high-tech worker shortage. How guest workers lower U.S. wages." Now, Rand Corporation looked backward in time, and then they found that, quote, "Despite recurring concerns about potential shortages of STEM personnel, we did not find any evidence that such shortages have existed, at least since 1990, nor that they are on tomorrow's horizon." Hey, folks, it doesn't get any more damning than that. I mean, come on. In an article that's entitled "The Science and Engineering Shortage is a Myth," which was published in The Atlantic, which again is talk about liberal progressive magazine. Michael Teitelbaum from the Harvard Law School, he summarized the literature on STEM. He says, quote, "No one has been able to find any evidence indicating current widespread labor market shortages or hiring difficulties in science and engineering occupations that require a bachelor's degree or higher." Now, By the way, Teitelbaum is one of the nation's leading experts on STEM employment, allegedly, because he's a Harvard guy, so I guess that makes him leading, right? But he's supposed to be a leading expert on STEM employment. He's the former vice president of the Sloan Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization that's devoted to STEM education. They make grants and stuff available. And he's the author of Falling Behind, Boom, Bust in the Global Race for Scientific Talent. It's published by Princeton University Press. So, I mean, the guy's got some credentials and bona fides, right? Here's the real reason that all of these corporations, and we're talking about all the multinationals now. When I say that, I want you to understand who we're talking about. We're talking about all the high-tech companies who are clamoring, screaming. By the way, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has come out in favor of amnesty for illegal immigrants. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Who do they represent? Big business. Now, the reason that they do, and the companies that are involved, and we're not just talking about the Google, AOL, Yahoo, although that's part of it. But there's also a lot of other smaller companies out there. And then there's a lot of, Apple is another one, right? There's a lot of companies that you wouldn't think would necessarily qualify for this, but need a lot of engineering skills. Caterpillar is an example. And, it's not just limited to high tech. I mean, people wouldn't ordinarily construe Caterpillar to be high tech. I mean, it's a big yellow machine that pushes dirt, right? We've had those for quite a while. There's not a whole lot of innovation in that. It's got a hydraulic hose that they may have improved the quality of, but basically it's the same functionality it's been for the last 30 years. So my point is simply this. These corporations it's not just a function of cheap labor. What this is hostage taking. And I mean that in its truest sense of the word. It's an economic form of kidnapping. Let me explain. You come over here from India, Pakistan. You come over here from France. You come over here from, some other third world country, right? You come over here from somewhere in the Eastern Bloc, where things are economically depressed. You come over here from any of the stands, right? You get an education here under a student visa, and when you are done, they want to staple your green card right to it. And that says you're entitled to now work here and stay here. The other thing that they're trying to push through is for these people who have a green card and here under these visas, for their wives or spouses, I should say, to be allowed to work in the United States. Now, right now, they're prohibited. In other words, you can work, but your spouse can't. Because, if there's 1 million of you and we have to let your spouses work, now we got 2 million, right? And that means that they are cutting back on American jobs. Because now you've got spouses who are doing God only knows what kind of work, everything from, sweeping the floors to CEOs. And suddenly they're competing with American spouses for the same jobs. Well, your creatures in Congress are willing and ready and desperate to allow that too. Why? I'm going to tell you why in a nutshell. Because if you balk, if you bellyache, if you complain about the pay or the hours that you're required to put in, if you whine about your rights, or you complain about the conditions under which you're required to work, guess what? They simply pull your work permit and you got to go home. And you have no intention of going back to that daub and wattle hut that you came from. That may sound cold, but it's the truth. Here's some interesting statistics, and this is government data. In 2012, there were more than twice as many people with STEM degrees, both immigrant and native born, as there were the STEM jobs that were available. So in other words, there's already a 2-to-1 ratio of STEM degrees to STEM jobs. So we've already got 2 people for every job. 5.3 million STEM jobs versus 12.1 million people with STEM degrees. Only 1/3 of the natives who have a STEM degree and have a job work in a STEM occupation: science, technology, engineering, and math, right? There are 1.5 million native-born Americans with engineering degrees not working as engineers, as well as 500,000 with technology degrees, 400,000 more with math degrees, and 2.6 million with science degrees that aren't even working in their degreed field. Plus, there are 1.2 million Native Americans with STEM degrees who are not working at all. You're kidding me, right? No, I'm telling you the truth. Meanwhile, less than half of all the immigrants with a STEM degree actually work in a STEM job as well. In particular, 23% of all the immigrants with engineering degrees work as engineers. Less than a quarter. Of the 700,000 immigrant STEM workers allowed into the country between 2007 and 2012, that's a pretty long span, only 1/3 of them got a STEM job, and 1/3 got a non-STEM job, and 1/3 don't have a job at all. Here's the problem. We have an overabundance of STEM qualified people, an underabundance of jobs. Government adds more and more and more regulation, which limits the amount of jobs that are out there because corporations are so busy making sure they're covering every jot and tittle that they don't get a chance to actually be innovative and creative anymore. That's the simple truth, ladies and gentlemen. All innovation and creativity is stopped. Medical research is ended. I mean, that's it. Now the only thing out there that anybody can get money for is climate change studies. Well, I mean, come on. There's plenty of money available if you're willing to do commissioned science that supports the administration's agenda. But if you're an actual scientist who really wants to, or an inventor who wants to actually create something, God forbid. See, the real truth is simply this. Companies like IBM, these banking corporations, the high technology markets, the low tech markets that still need engineering skills and staff and science degrees, they're not interested in hiring Americans because they can't hold anything over your head. They can't hold and dangle the sword of Damocles over you. They can, however, hold the sword of Damocles over a guy who came and left some, impoverished life behind, came over here, worked hard, got himself a degree. All of that I applaud. And I admire their desire to stay in the country and continue to work. Now they bring their spouse over. Now they've made a life. They're used to being able to drive a car. They've actually got a Toyota or a General Motors car. Here's the problem. They're not willing to give that up. They like their iPhone. They like their computer. They like the fact that they can live in a 2-bedroom apartment and they don't have to have 13 other people living with them. They like the fact that they've got air conditioning. They like the fact that they've got an actual refrigerator, that they've got 2 toilets in the house versus no toilets in the house, that they've got a toilet that actually flushes and you don't have to go outside in the dead of winter to use the bathroom. They like the fact that they have an opportunity to go out and have a beer with some friends and relax a little bit, that they don't have to go out into the field, or that they are not hamstrung by some misguided religious doctrine that says you can't do that because that's, reason for me to flay you alive with a cat of 9 tails. That's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. These people don't want to go back to that. Who would? Think about it. Who would? And that's the foreign stuff. We haven't even hit on Mexico. But the simple truth is this. Those companies want to hold those people as indentured slaves. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the real motivation behind immigration amnesty. Don't support slavery. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can communicate with me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the VA scandal must be converted to a criminal investigation. Nothing less will do. Criminal. They've already destroyed a lot of evidence. We'll be right back.